Hey everybody, I have a video here for you today, and kind of difficult to decide what I'm going to talk about next in my Ancient America series, but I thought I'd talk about probably one of the more fascinating sites that I did not make a video about in my original Ancient America series about 3 years ago. And I've got a few other videos I've been researching. One that I'm really trying to get my head wrapped around and give you guys a good video on, and that's the Osiris shaft out in front of the Middle Pyramid of Giza. And that has been a big mystery, and after a video I do, I hope that isn't so much of a mystery anymore, and I hope it isn't so much of a mystery what the shrine was out in front of the Giza pyramids. But with that said, we are going to fly down to Ohio. And this place is called Fort Ancient because historians can give it a no better name than that. This really wasn't a fort, but the reason why they call it that is because this is surrounded by a huge earthwork, a huge wall that surrounded the place, but there was a couple dozen gates at least. So it wasn't built for defensive purposes. Was it built for astronomical alignments? Well, it was a massive wall, and you can still see the remnants of it. And we're going to take a little bit of a look here on Google Earth in a second. But they say this place was built maybe a little over 2,000 years ago originally, and then natives that lived in the area set up shop here. But when was this place originally built? Do I question the dating? Well, I question everything these days. I really do. And reading more and more about this ancient America, I think this series was a good one to do because it's opened up a lot of questions as well as answered some questions. But why don't we go down here and just take a peek on Google Earth. Now let's just go back here a second, if that truck will get out of my way. But right at the gate here, you can see what's left of the massive earthen embankment that surrounds the place, covered with vegetation, and I imagine eroded quite a bit. But when this place was in its original form, I imagined it was mighty impressive, and there is still a lot of it left today. And here is a view of that earthen embankment from about 100 years ago. So I think we've lost part of this, but very impressive, and this surrounded the whole complex, so it would have taken a lot of man hours to build, that is for sure. And now we are down just outside of the gate here, and there are some mounds out here. There's one right there. Here are the mounds we just looked at, and just coming into the park here, here is that earthen wall. Coming in here, you can see some small mounds, and a few of these are unique. You can see something in the ground there. Now we have a mound right down here, and what makes some of these unique here are these are made out of stone. These are not really earthen burial mounds, they're more like stone cairns coming from Scotland. Just thought I would point that out, and that's what makes this spot kind of unique. Now this is Ohio History Central, and I will leave the links I used below. It says the Fort Ancient earthworks are a series of earthen embankments that extend for more than 3½ miles around a high bluff along the Little Miami River in southwestern Ohio. And I know there has been a few other sites on the Little Miami River that I've talked about. It says, although it is called a fort, it probably never served as a defensive work. Ditches are located inside the walls rather than outside, as might be expected in a fortification. There are more than 60 gateways in the walls, making it difficult to defend a site against enemies. The earthworks include two major components called the South Fort and the North Fort. The South Fort is the oldest section. A long, narrow neck referred to as the Middle Fort connects these two parts. The most prominent gateway is located in the northeastern part of the North Fort. And it says, these two mounds are located just outside the gateway. These frame the entrance to a set of parallel walls that once extended northeastward for nearly a half a mile, where they ended in a semicircular enclosure surrounding a mound. And it gives credit to the building of the earthworks to the Hopewell culture. It says, later American Indian residents built a village and a cemetery within the walls of the already ancient South Fort. Archaeologists mistakenly assume that these villagers had built the earthen walls. This latter culture was called the Fort Ancient culture. So the Fort Ancient culture is the culture of the natives that they really just want to put a general name on it, so they call it the Fort Ancient culture, which really is a misrepresentation of what this site is. And it is no representation of who these people were. The Hopewell culture, and I have talked about where that modern name came from, just because we don't know who these people were. But these people built these earthworks, these stone cairn mounds, these massive long walls with ditches, presumably from 2,000 years ago. It's a Hopewell culture that they give credit to, but they call it the Fort Ancient culture. That this site kind of confuses me, but very impressive. And here, the Fort Ancient culture, which is the culture misrepresented in building the earthworks, it says they lived from 1000 to 1650, and it says they thrived in southern Ohio and northern Kentucky. Villages were made of a number of circular or rectangular houses surrounding an open plaza. It says there is evidence that the Fort Ancient culture built serpent mounds in Adams County, Ohio. And they may have built the Alligator Mound of Licking County, and I made a video on that, I believe, too. Now here is Ancient Ohio Trail, and they have an excellent article here on Fort Ancient, and they have a video attached. So why don't we watch?
From the high bridge that carries Interstate 71 across the Little Miami, we can look to the south and see Fort Ancient. The 2,000-year-old earthen wall is still visible, even from here. The earthwork forms a rim for the hilltop, enclosing about 100 acres. The southern plateau was ringed first, then connected by a passage to a larger area to the north. Long parallel walls stretched out to the northeast. Many settlements were nearby. Centuries later, two small serpent effigies were built just across the river.
So that'll give you an idea what it may have looked like originally. Here is some looks at some excavation done here. Here is a look. They theorize from one of these mounds that through gateways they are aligned to solstice events. Now here is a look at the Great Gate, as they call it, from a very early pic. You can see the embankments here and a gateway that they use for a roadway later on. And here they have a short video where they talk about the mounds, so let's just play that real quick.
The large twin mounds framed the ancient North Gate and the modern road. It was here that Dr. Patricia Essenprice in 1990 discovered the deep trenches that the ancients dug from the nearby streams up to these mounds. Filling with spring water, they completed a water boundary for the entire earthwork. From here, the parallel walls headed to the northeast, with at least 500 feet of stone pavement filling the 140-foot space between them. They followed the highest elevation of the plateau to where a small mound once stood, just beyond Middleborough Road. Near these parallel walls, ancient building sites have been discovered, apparently specialized craft shops, since caches of obsidian, flint, and copper were found.
Mounds such as these at Fort Ancient probably had many functions besides burials. In fact, very few of the mounds at Fort Ancient contained burials. They may have been used for signal fires, as here in the North Fort, the Moorhead in the 1890s reported that these were basically large piles of limestone that were very heavily burnt. We also know that mounds marked the entryways of primary gateways into the enclosure and really were sort of a signaling device of the built environment that people would read, see the large twin mounds and say, oh, that's the appropriate place to enter the earthwork complex. So the function of the mounds here at Fort Ancient was much beyond that of simply burying the deceased kin.
But let me sum it up this way. It says this plateau was actually used long before the construction of the Fort Ancient site, and after as well. We find artifacts here that date to as early as 5,000 years BC. In addition, the later so-called Fort Ancient culture occupied the South Fort around AD 1000. So, the Fort Ancient culture, it seems, came along maybe 6,000 years after the original occupants. Seems the Hopewell culture, that's who they say built these massive earthworks. We have some early pics here coming from excavation. Who knows what time period this came from? It seems to be a whole mishmash of cultures. Historians call this Fort Ancient, even though this culture seems to be one of the very latter cultures that lived here. History seems to stretch back 7,000 years as far as artifacts go. We have henges, we have stone mounds, we have earthen burial mounds, we have alignments. We have an ancient mysterious city in the middle of Ohio. Hope you thought that was cool, and you all have a very nice day.